Hey guys, welcome to a Tuesday podcast. And this week, kind of following up on a discussion video that I made a little bit ago, we're going to be talking about co-op games and specifically why it doesn't seem like there are any really good co-op shooters around there. To start off, just to put this conversation in some context, are we counting versus games as co-op? For instance, are we counting like Overwatch? Because technically speaking, that's a co-op game, but it's team versus team.
So, are you saying you want to extend the discussion to 4-player games? Or like multiplayer games, or just co-op games where you're assisting each other? Because a game like Mario Party has both, because it has team mechanics and it also has versus mechanics at the same time too.
Good game.
Yeah, very good game, very good series. Except for some of them. Some of them are garbage.
Not the new two.
Yeah, it's bad.
I think
there's some benefits. There's some benefits to the new Mario Party.
Well, I mean, we all know that there are team versus shooters out there, Call of Duty, and I'm not gonna try and list a bunch of them, but like,
I don't like Call of Duty. I think it's garbage.
Well, okay, most people don't like Call of Duty.
It's turned into garbage.
Yeah.
I never went through a phase where I liked it.
But I think the point is that although those team versus games do have co-op technically, it's not really the sort of strategizing co-op that you would see in something like an action RPG or a MOBA. Really what you're doing is you're playing your own personal game and yelling at your teammates to do this or do that. There's no actual teamwork. Now, having not played Overwatch, I am not entirely confident on extending that statement to Overwatch, because from what I've heard, there are some really good team dynamics there. But I think Overwatch is the exception and not the rule in this case. So let's talk about why there aren't very many good co-op campaign shooters, I guess is what I'm saying. Or if we know of some recent good co-op campaign shooters, like what are they, and that sort of thing.
I mean, I don't play anything strictly co-op ever. I mean, I'm very much a single player type of guy.
Yeah.
I will say one of the best and most fun series of like campaign co-op games that I've played is the EDF series, and just because of how absolutely just insane it can get, like it's very difficult because like there's 4-player for it, but you can't access the 4-player because each person has to have a copy of EDF, which means 4 people have to buy EDF. But the co-op, like the co-op campaign of it and everything like that, is super fun because literally all you're doing the entire time is blowing up. The physics are ridiculous. Like you're just fighting thousands and thousands of ants or aliens or bugs or whatever, dragons, and there's frog. I think there's frogs in one of them too.
Really?
It gets awesome. It gets ridiculous. Yeah, but like it's just so much fun because it's nonsensical every step of the way, and it never tries to be something that's more than that. It always tries to keep itself being fun. And so it's probably, if everybody had a copy of it, like that'd be a super fun game to play.
Yeah.
But like just by itself, by like 2-player, it's a very fun experience because you're just doing nothing but having fun with somebody else.
Right.
Which is like, I think, kind of the core of what you're trying to get to in the co-op campaign thing, because it's going through an experience with someone and it's having fun while having that experience with the other person.
Yes, but quick aside, EDF came out in 2017, did it?
No, because there are multiple games of EDF.
Well, the newest one?
4.1 came out in like 2015.
Okay, I was gonna say because when I played it with you, I was like, this feels really old.
Yeah, it's a little old, but I think they kept on updating it, and it's pretty great.
Anyway, so like I was saying,
what is EDF?
Okay, so
Oh my gosh.
okay, so I definitely have to have you play this game. But EDF, otherwise titled Earth Defense Force, is a game about bugs invading Earth, and so it's a campy, sandbox type game where you and 3 friends are sent into a little level, and you have to defeat all the enemies or do a certain type of objective that the level wants you to do, and essentially what ends up happening is you are just fighting through waves and waves of bugs, all as they keep on spawning and stuff like that, with the most ridiculous weapons. You can choose up to 4 different classes, and you can get a bunch of insane weapons like grenades that turn into nukes or missile launchers that blot out the sky or anything like that. And it just gets ridiculous, but it's super fun too because the ragdoll physics also impart the fact that if you fire a missile launcher that's bigger than your face, you're gonna fly 30 feet backwards, and it's gonna be absolutely wonderful as it's happening.
Yeah.
So it's a very fun game.
So, sorry.
Yeah, I love the looting system in the game because there's little boxes on the ground that you can collect, and you can just get more and more weapons.
Yeah, and you're guaranteed a weapon too. So if you have a friend who's like, "Oh, I need weapons," and you don't need any weapons, then you'd be like, "Okay, you go and pick up all the boxes," and he'll get all the weapons and everything for that level, and you don't need to worry about it. So instead of it being completely RNG based on being based on how good you are at the game, if you want to help somebody level up their character, you just be like, "Okay, pick up everything that's coming towards you," and they can immediately level themselves up if you already have enough gear. Or you can share it if you're both trying to progress for the first time.
Alright, so that's kind of a... So, EDF is it's a campy shooter, right? Yeah. And if we looked hard enough, we could probably find more games like EDF.
Yeah. Oh.
What about Halo-type shooter co-op, where you're actually playing through a campaign that has a meaningful and substantial story to it? You know, that you're not just running around shooting crap. You're actually playing through a story. You know.
That's a difficult one because there honestly aren't a lot of those games anymore because
precisely
the biggest thing is that everybody's focusing more on online play and multiplayer play. Like one of the brand new games that came out, Vermintide 2. So amazing game. It's pretty much you fighting against a horde of chaos monsters and rats and everything like that, and it's wonderful. But the entire point of it is to have 4 people have a copy of the game and play through it. You're never actually they're playing it with them online, but it's not a sit down. You're there with the person. You can play the game with each other.
It's not a team experience.
It is a team. No, it is a team experience for sure. It's definitely a team experience. It's not a party. It's not a party.
Are you
experience.
thinking about couch co-op? We're not talking about couch co-op.
Okay, well if we're not talking about couch co-op, then
it's
it's absolutely
the same thing, isn't it?
I mean, well,
we're not, because we're talking about say, I was going over to a friend's house. I could bring my monitor, bring my console. We could both plug in the same game. Kind of like how if you've ever played a Dark Souls game with a friend.
LAN play.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would technically be couch co-op. Because even though you're on 2 different systems, you're there with the person physically.
Well,
I'm saying multiplayer would be online multiplayer would be you're a mile away from the next person or even more distance than that, and you're playing online.
Yeah, so precisely. You can still do that. And have a party chat, and it's you're...
Yeah.
But the point is that you're on a team. It's not whether you're sharing a screen or whether you're not sharing a screen.
Okay.
What I'm talking about is how, for fans of shooters like
Halo.
Like Metro.
Gears of War? Does Gears of War have
Gears of
co-op?
I don't think it does.
Yeah,
Gears of War has
it does,
great
definitely.
co-op.
Oh, it does?
Yeah.
In my opinion.
It's very good. Very good.
Okay, so
I
we should probably introduce ourselves just to make sure people know which voice is coming from who, though.
Right. I'm
sure.
Steven.
I'm Josh, the sound guy.
It's your boy TJ, the useless guy.
I'm Jake.
From State Farm. I'm Nathan, not from State Farm.
Okay, so Nathan, what is your experience with Gears of War?
Well, personally, Gears of War is my favorite game for the Xbox generally. I kind of just grew up on it, and I generally like in-your-face kind of stuff like that when I do sit down and play a console game. And so I picked up Gears of War because it has everything you need. It's pretty basic. There's no advanced mechanics or anything, and for somebody that's trying to be casual play, that's really good because I can just load up the game and play through the storyline. But then also, it's got enough differences in it that it's not just copy paste. This is game kind of thing.
Like what?
Well, I feel like it still has like different types of weapons, although some people say they're the same. They all got their fun little quirks. It has interesting little combat details where you can duck and cover and still aim and, you know, take certain advantages with like quick reload and whatnot.
But
so there's enough where it's like, okay, I can be better at this game than a normal person,
but like as far as the co-op is concerned, is it?
Oh no.
Jake was trying to say something.
Oh,
No,
I'm sorry.
no, it's fine.
The co-op I really enjoy because what it is, it's you and your friend. It's usually only like one person, so like 2 people can play.
Okay. Is this co-op based on the campaign?
Based on the campaign, yes.
Okay.
Basically, you're
Okay,
going
so-
through the same campaign, going in. You basically have another person there fighting with you.
Okay.
But there's some events that come up, and usually when you're playing by yourself, you can only do one half of it. You know, you don't know what the other half is. But when you're playing co-op, the other person goes, and you really have where the AI would be assisting you, and they can be kind of they're just kind of waiting for you to get done.
Mm-hmm.
You actually have people working to help you finish your side. Like I remember this iconic moment, and this is like in every game they have a scene that's like this. But I think it's in the first one actually. You're going through this big kind of like church, and you have to make a decision whether to go through the corridor or you have to go through the main hall. And when you go through the corridor, you're fighting a bunch of people on like mountain machine guns and just shooting straight down at you. But there's also like a lock on the end, and the people going through the main hall can't get through unless you open the lock that's on your side. And you also, in like the main corridor, you have people spawning in, and there's just a lot more. And the thing is, if you ever get through your side, you can start like going through and like helping the people on the other side, and they can do vice versa if you're like getting overwhelmed. So
Okay.
it's interesting that it's not a huge separation, a huge difference, but you're still having moments where you can fight side by side and also have your own little separate experiences.
And see, I didn't realize that Gears of War did have a co-op mode.
Yeah.
That's really cool. So, okay, so as far as like story shooters that do have co-op, we have Halo, but Halo is kind of the archetypical, you know, Halo is the ideal for a story-based shooter with co-op. I think we can all
4
agree.
and 5.
Yeah.
Which just
Yeah, 4 and 5.
4 and 5 don't count, okay?
Don't
4 and 5 don't
4
count.
and 5 don't exist. I don't know what you're
4
talking
and 5
about.
don't count.
4 and 5 don't exist.
But you know, Halo is kind of the ideal. Like that is whenever people of our generation, and I think y'all may agree, y'all may disagree. Whenever, but it's true for me that whenever I think of a story-based shooter, and I think when anyone from our generation thinks of a story-based shooter, they're thinking of Halo 3 or Halo Reach, because that is kind of what we grew up with, and it's what kind of defined what a co-op game, or rather what a co-op shooter is supposed to look like, right?
Well, I have a series that I think is arguably the best that does co-op shooters.
Really?
I think it's Army of Two. I think that was a great game. It did
I've
co-op
never-
fantastically.
But
it's
that's
dead.
very true.
I've
That's very
actually never heard of that.
Yeah. You never heard of Army,
Army
of
of
Two?
2 was completely built on the basis of a co-op experience.
It's
Really?
fantastic.
What's
game.
it for?
It's for Xbox, PlayStation, probably PC. I wouldn't doubt it.
I
need to
will
look
say that
into
the
that.
second one is kind of terrible.
First or bust.
The first
Don't get
one,
the other ones.
yeah, the first one is probably the best because it's good.
By far the best. Yeah.
Yeah.
I hated the water level, but you know that's every
Yeah.
water level ever.
So that's kind of the big difference though, because you have a bunch of these like really good games that have come out a while ago that had co-op modes for their entire campaign, so you could go through the entire story of the game, relive the entire story with a friend if you wanted to.
Right.
But nowadays, most of it is set to the point of online multiplayer. Like 2 people have to own the same copy of the game, and then if you want to go through the like entire experience, then you can do that.
Well,
And the only like games that bridge that gap are games specifically designed with people being like, I want a couch co-op experience.
Well, and see, I don't think that that's a problem. I don't think it's a problem to have 2 different consoles and 2 different discs. In fact, probably, I'm trying to think. One of my favorite co-op games ever Y'all are gonna all groan when I say it, but Bloodborne. My favorite co-op game ever.
That doesn't really count, though.
No, it absolutely does.
It's not co-op, though.
It is co-op.
Absolutely not, dude.
Have you ever played co-op in Bloodborne?
It's just like Dark Souls, and that does not count. Absolutely not. I mean, there are other
it
players
does
who
count.
can play with you, but you can't play through the whole game.
Can the
without
players that
kicking
you
them off and
summon?
making them
Can the players that you summon follow you through the entire campaign?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Barely. They have to either play through the whole campaign themselves. You guys either have to switch off, and every time you guys beat a boss, they get sent away. I don't think it counts as a co-op.
I have done co-op runs of Bloodborne before.
Because I can't.
You can make it happen.
Yeah.
Me and my friend have done multiple. I'm wanting to get him on the channel at some point. He's a really cool guy.
Mm-hmm.
I would like to say that I kind of agree with TJ here. I wouldn't count that game as a co-op game because it doesn't try to give you that option from the very beginning. When I think of a co-op game, I think of one that says single player, multiplayer on the screen. And now I know there are some that are like, oops, sorry, my phone's on. I like to think of games that like allow you to like pick like when to play with each other and has that like capability. Now I kind of agree with him in saying that like yeah, you can make it happen, you can get somebody in, you can like go through it all together, but that doesn't really feel co-op because there's like so many hoops you have to jump through.
As someone who's played through Bloodborne multiple, and I've heard that. Well, hold on. Yeah, Dark Souls is pretty much the same co-op system as Bloodborne. I would argue that it's actually more co-op based, because the thing is that whenever another person enters the world, at least the bosses scale up in damage and in health. The enemies in the world, not so much. However, the point is that whenever you're playing with another person, you don't really have that much extra firepower. It doesn't. As far as raw numbers are concerned, you don't have that much of an advantage. The advantage you have is strategic, because now you have another player that you can coordinate with, and you can say, all right, I'm going to go and aggro these enemies and draw them into your attack. They're going to come around this corner, and you're going to be charging this heavy attack. So right as they come around the corner, wham, you can get them and they're dead. Or something like, you're trying to beat back a mob of enemies, and you can say to them, okay, I'm dying. I'm going to dodge backwards. You come in and hold these guys back while I heal. That sort of thing. And I would argue that is actually more co-op than something like Gears of War, because it requires a high degree of coordination, a high degree of strategy, and it requires a high degree of what am I saying? I was gonna say communication, but and teamwork, but that's coordination. Anyway.
So I have a question.
Sure.
So whenever another character enters the Bloodborne world, do both of the characters develop like the same way, or does the second player like?
They're effectively the exact same player.
Yeah.
Oh, they're the same player.
Yeah. No. They're both. So I can take one of my characters and join any of my friends' worlds, provided I have access to the location where they're at, and we can play through that level, and we'll both play normally, as if we were in our own world. We'll both gain currency, we'll both take damage, deal damage, that sort of thing. The only difference being that once you defeat the boss, the visitor, quote unquote, will be sent home. However, the thing is that Bloodborne is linear enough that if you have a character who's already beaten the game, and you haven't sent them into New Game Plus, it's as easy as, okay, I've been sent home, walk 20 steps that way to the next lamp, where the next area is, and I'll rejoin your world in like 30 seconds.
But the big difficulty, and I'm not talking about you, I'm talking about, like, say this is happening to 2 new players that are entering the entire game. If this is happening to 2 new players, every single time they go through a boss, that person's going to get kicked back out, and then they have to go and find the point where you're at, put the sign down on the floor. I haven't played Bloodborne, so I don't exactly know how it
different
works.
from Bloodborne to Dark Souls.
It's different?
Yeah.
So how do players get summoned into the map?
So in Bloodborne, what you do is one person rings a
bell.
One person rings a big bell. That's the beckoning bell.
Okay.
Then one person rings a small resonant bell, and the person with the small resonant bell gets summoned into the other person's world. I agree. For new players, it's a real hassle. It is not a very streamlined system, and it's certainly cumbersome. However, the game is still co-op.
See, that goes back to my point where I was making earlier. It doesn't really feel co-op if you have to go through so many hoops just to play with your friend. And I kind of want to talk about this point that you made earlier when you were kind of just talking about how, like, the difficulty and yada 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 made it feel more like a co-op game. To me, I don't really care for difficulty or these high intense games. I like casual. I'm going to sit down and play with my friend.
Right.
And this kind of goes back to just say that, like, I don't think difficulty in the game itself, like, gives way to co-opness or not. I think it's how easy is it for you to sit down and play with another person, whether that be online 100 miles away or right next to the guy.
I'd agree with you. I do want to clear up a point. I wasn't saying that the difficulty makes it more co-op-ish. I was saying, what I was trying to say was that the way that combat happens in this game and the way that your characters move makes it to where there's a high degree of strategy. And adding another player on your team, it adds another dimension of strategy to it, to where you can now coordinate, and the advantage is not that you can deal more damage because you're both shooting at them. The advantage you have is that you can now take on more enemies at once. You can now focus on one enemy to where you can focus on one enemy at a time and get it done faster. It's less, at least in the case of Dark Souls and Bloodborne, it has less in common with a shooter co-op and more in common with something like a MOBA co-op, to where you really are relying on your teammate.
Can I say one thing about the Dark Souls series and the Bloodborne series?
Yeah.
I don't know why I forgot that name. We've been talking about this the entire time.
That's all he talks about.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
So the
I'm
one
so
thing,
sorry.
and no, it's fine. But the one thing that I just want to say about games like that is we've talked about games like Halo with their built-in co-op. We talked about Gears of War, built-in co-op. Army of Two, built for co-op. The entire game is built around the idea of co-op. Dark Souls and this series and Bloodborne, not technically a game built around co-op. It's a game built around the experience. It's a game built around the combat. It's a game built around the bosses, and it's a game built around the difficulty. The co-op aspect of it is something completely different to like the main point of Dark Souls. I'm not saying that the co-op is bad. I'm just saying that the co-op is a secondary experience.
It's like an optional.
It's an optional
I would
thing.
say it was never even in the mind of the developers whenever they did it. It was just something that was like, okay, if they're getting invaded, they can invite someone over. They're having trouble with the boss, they can invite someone over. I don't think they ever had in their mind, let's have someone run through the whole game with them. I feel like that's just something that was an oversight, basically.
Oh, well, hold on. Before y'all go any further, you have to remember the way that level design and the way that game design in general works. In any co-op scenario, you can't just have single player plus one. That never works. Because if you have something that's designed for single player and you add another person into it, then something that was essentially what you're doing is you're putting 2 rats in a maze that was only designed for 1 rat. Does that make sense? And so the world will either become cramped, or it will become awkward in some way, or it will become so absurdly easy that it's just no fun. And so when you're talking about Bloodborne and Dark Souls, you have to keep in mind that in order to throw another player into that world, the entire world has to be built as friendly to both one player and two players. In the case of Dark Souls 2 and 3, friendly to up to 6 players. Because you can have, up to 7 players, because in Dark Souls 2 and 3 you can have a summoner, meaning a host of the world, 3 cooperators, and 3 invaders, for a total of 7 people on the world.
I think you only have 2 invaders.
I think you're right. Yeah, you can only have 2 invaders, but that's still 6 players on the world. Yeah. And so the entire world has to be built in such a way, it couldn't have been an oversight. Because if it was an oversight, then frankly, Dark Souls and Bloodborne...
Scaling wouldn't have been a thing if it was an oversight, is what you're saying.
Scaling wouldn't have been a thing, and the levels themselves would have felt wrong if there were 2 players in it. For instance, hallways would be too narrow. There wouldn't be enough cover. Things like there would be I'm actually imagining one specific area in the beginning portion of Dark Souls 2 that absolutely aggravated me. Sorry, but there would be areas.
Flashbacks.
There would be areas of the game that you could do with 1 player, but with 2 players, it would either be so frustrating you would just tell the person, "Okay, sit back and let me do this," or it would end up being a cakewalk. For instance, say there are 3 enemies in the room, each hiding behind a certain set of cover, right? You approach it with 1 character, and the room is a certain size that, you run to 1 enemy, and you fight him, and then you run to the next enemy, you fight him, next enemy, you fight him. But with 2 players, you have just that little bit of extra aggro range that you aggro all 3 of them at the same time, and because of the size of the room, it becomes a mosh pit of congratulations, both of you are now dead. Conversely, you could have it be the room be just a little bit too big, and both of you can aggro all 3 of them at the same time, but because of their spacing, all it takes is 2 charged heavy attacks, and whammo, all 3 of them are dead. Too easy. Does that make sense?
No.
The world has to be made for co-op from the get-go. Otherwise, co-op won't work.
Yeah, and that's why we're saying it's not. I wouldn't exactly call it an oversight, because again, an oversight wouldn't mean that they would have that many changes or that many additions to it.
Yeah.
But I definitely would think that those games, when I say those games, I mean the series of Dark Souls and Bloodborne itself, the games were meant for single player. The games were meant to experience. There is no doubt that there is a lot of work put into the co-op aspect, but the co-op aspect is not the main point of the game.
I would
on
say
that, can we agree?
More so for Dark Souls than for Bloodborne, because with Bloodborne you have there are actually almost every covenant has rewards for doing certain things in co-op,
and that's
Dark Souls too.
Anyway, I would say more so Dark Souls than Bloodborne, but generally, yeah, they are single-player games.
Yeah.
However, I would argue that they are also simultaneously co-op games.
Okay.
I just want to discuss the point that you made about level design. I feel like your point might necessarily be the best to make, because I feel like sometimes it's just thematic to have a really thin hallway or a really large room, and they might not be necessarily thinking, oh yeah, we get 1 more guy in here and it fits just right, or something like that. I think level design in itself isn't a good enough reason to say, oh, this was made for co-op. Because I feel like I'm talking about the layout of the room and not just like the enemies and stuff in it. Just because I feel like sometimes even in co-op games you design the rooms to feel, cramped or compact or stuff, and I'm just saying that it doesn't necessarily give me enough respect towards the game to say that it is a co-op game just because the levels feel like they're designed well enough for it. Because I feel like sometimes it just so happens to work that way, for a single player.
I guarantee you that's not the case, and to make my counterpoint, I'll ask you this. How many people fit onto an Overwatch map?
I mean,
that's a completely different setting, though.
I mean,
no, just hear me out. How many people fit onto an Overwatch
I've
map?
never played Overwatch before, so you guys.
I haven't played Overwatch, and so like
5v5?
I haven't played Overwatch.
6v6.
6v6. Okay, 12 people. Do you think that an Overwatch map would work as well or better if it were 7v7?
I feel like it could.
Yeah.
I feel like it'd be just the same.
Well, the thing is, the way with an Overwatch map and the way that works is, again, I've never played it, so take everything that I'm saying with a grain of salt.
Mm-hmm.
But the map that I see with Overwatch, because you have so many different classes and so many different types, you have snipers, you have assaulters, you have melee enthusiasts, you have people that provide support and stuff like that. The map is designed to have choke points, to have higher up areas, to have different areas where each class can work their best. And I don't think it's more of a point where if there were more on one team or another, or if there were more on both teams, that it would make a difference. It's that the level is specifically designed to give each class its own advantage and disadvantage.
Well, precisely. But if there were more of each class,
with the map being like that,
then the map would have to be adapted.
No. With the map being like that, regardless of the amount of players, as long as it doesn't get into Battle Royale Overwatch, something like that, which I can honestly see with every single game going to Battle Royale. I saw a freaking Worm game going into Battle Royale. Yeah, it was ridiculous. But regardless of the amount of players, if it went to 10v10, it would be based on the players' subset, what type they want, and how they want to play the game and where they're at. That's what I think.
Okay, but the thing is that if you have a map that's designed specifically for 6v6, and then you add 8 extra players in it, you're going to suffer overcrowding.
Well, that's 8 extra characters.
As someone that's
10v10.
As someone that's super experienced in Overwatch, I agree that if you add more players to the maps, it'll just be way too much going on.
Precisely. Okay. Now, wouldn't you agree that the game designers had to have chosen specifically, okay, this is how many people are going to be on a map at any given time, this is how many people are going to be on a team, and we are going to design the map around this many people being on one team and this many people being on the other team?
I would agree and disagree because I feel like you do have flexibility. You could have a 4v4 on Overwatch map or an 8v8. But to every game, there is going to be a point when there's just too many people. And before you cut me off, I want to say that Overwatch is completely different than a Dark Souls game because there's just so much. It's a bright, colorful game with action nonstop. Everything is meant to fire rapidly. So you can't necessarily compare it along that same line to a game that's much more calculating, much more slow, much more, hey, we're going to take this step by step.
Yeah. And I want to say about Dark Souls setting, I feel like the setting matters a whole lot more than the design of the overall world, because I feel like the game is... we'll finish our point in a second, but I'd say that the design of the game is designed to where you're supposed to feel small, you're in a land of giants, everyone else around you is big, so everything around you must also be accommodated to make things look bigger so that you're smaller. Same thing in Dark Souls, because you're supposed to be the underdog taking on the world, taking on things much larger than yourself, which, even the doorway may be bigger, but it's not bigger because it wants multiple people to be in there. It's bigger because it wants to make you feel smaller.
So that's the point.
Hold on. I wasn't equating Dark Souls to Overwatch. I was trying to make a point about game design. And that point, and it's a point that's applicable to game design, to writing, to filmmaking, any kind of art. And that is, in good art, in this case, good game design, everything has a reason, everything has a purpose, everything is intentional. Which means that if you were to create a game for single player and then add an extra person in there, all of your levels will have to change in some way. For example, if I think I'm the only one who's familiar with Hellblade, if you added a second person into Hellblade, the entire landscape of that game would have to be altered to account for the second player. What I'm saying is that in Dark Souls, and I think this is a point that I've made already, but in Dark Souls, hold on, shit.
Ooga booga, keep our things entertained.
Dude.
Just make noises. I'm sure they'll enjoy it.
No, what I'm saying is that in Dark Souls, they can't have intended it just as a single player game. Because if it was intended just as a single player game, then the multiplayer wouldn't work at all.
But that's interesting because when you explain it like that, you're saying that the base Dark Souls experience, if you want to play it single player, all the levels were meant for 2 players. Not the enemies and not the bosses, because the bosses will be scaled down in according to it being a one-person game. But the levels themselves cannot change. They cannot form differently when a new player comes into it. So what you're saying is that each level in the entire game was designed for 2 people.
And see, that's the thing, and that is why FromSoft is so good at making games. Is because.
But is that the case?
Hold on, no, it's both. Each and every level, the entire world, was designed for 1 player, and it was also designed for 2 players. It is friendly, it is possible, and it is workable for both 1 player and 2 players, and 3 players, and 4, 5, a whole 6 players if you're playing Dark Souls 2 or Dark Souls 3. And that's why the game design. That's why it's so well made. Is because they've managed to unify single player and multiplayer. Does that make any sense at all?
No. We're getting the conversation. We're just putting our own points and own thoughts onto it. Okay. Also, we should definitely talk about some other co-op games that would also be interesting as well.
Absolutely.
Some that were actually designed and titled as co-op games.
Absolutely.
Yeah, no, for sure.
Let's get
there
away
are
from
many more
Dark
co-op
Souls.
games that we can get into.
I had a couple on my mind that we didn't get to talk about.
You mentioned
like right now.
We can still,
Because I was gonna bring up. Crap, we were talking about it by ourselves real quietly just a second ago. Borderlands. Borderlands is a fantastic game, completely designed around co-op. You play it by yourself, it gets real weird. It doesn't fit at all.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the cutscenes don't work.
Huh.
They're like, as you talk to someone, it's like, you all sure are glad you're here. And I'm like, I'm the only one here.
either he's flying the entire game, or something else is going on. But the other thing is too, with Borderlands and Borderlands 2, when you play with multiple characters, they share dialogue between each other that you would never hear if you played in a single player.
That's really cool.
Which gives more information about the story and what's going on around
really
you.
cool.
Yeah, exactly.
Because you play by yourself, the characters are just a character.
They're just super quiet, and then when you kill something, you're like, I killed you.
I
In
killed
30 different ways, and then that's pretty much it.
Yeah.
That's really cool. Yeah, Borderlands is one of the ones that I've been wanting to play for a while now.
I can't wait for Borderlands 3. That's all I can
Is
do.
it
Borderlands 3 coming?
Yeah, they're making it.
I talk it up, but I did not like any Borderlands game. But it's not my genre, so oops.
Oh, okay. Well, that's
Blame me in the comments.
I feel like it's a weird RPG shooter blend because isn't it heavily stat based?
It's
It's
stat based
got
and it has a very high RNG factor because all the guns are based on randomized parts.
Okay,
And
yeah.
all the randomized parts have their own randomized stats.
Yeah,
So it's
Because I had a friend that I was talking to about hey, if I got Borderlands, would you play it with me? And he's like, no, I don't really like Borderlands because it's too stat based. And I'm like, all right.
I don't know if there's a quicker way to get shut down, but
really. But
I do want to bring back one point that you talked about, and
Okay.
it wasn't about Bloodborne.
Thank God.
Amazing, incredible.
Thank God.
But one point that you made about co-op games that I do not agree with
Okay.
is that you said that games that are only multiplayer and not based on couch co-op are completely fine, and that is and you said that was like a better solution to having couch co-op games. And I will not say that, because a lot of the games that I used to play in my childhood, like Halo 2, like the EDF series, like pretty much everything else, I was able to play that with a friend who did not initially know about the game or want to actually buy a copy of the game. And it was that playthrough with that person that got them interested in the game and was like, okay, this is actually something that I might be able to might be willing to like pay money for. And if you have to do it on a copy by copy by copy basis, like, you have to invest money into that game, and if you don't like it, then tough.
Yeah.
If you play enough of it to where you know about it, then tough. You can't get a refund. It's pretty much over at this point. Which is why I love couch co-op so much.
I would like just to agree with that. I think that's something that came from like the good generation of games where you could like literally just sit down with a friend and like, hey, let me show you this.
Not to say that multiplayer isn't bad at all, because of course I also agree with multiplayer, because there are situations where you literally cannot be around the other person. Like, they're 100 miles away, but you also want to hang out or play a game just to share about old times or whatever. But like, couch co-op definitely has its place in gaming. It's becoming much, much less of a place because more and more multiplayer is coming out, which makes me super sad. But couch co-op is definitely something that should still be a thing, for sure, because it gets people invested in video games that they never knew about. It makes people want to pay more money to developers because they're interested in something like this. The same way that Halo 2 sold copies. Halo 2 was one of my favorite Halo games of all time.
Oh, yeah.
And the only reason it was that was because of its co-op. Because I was able to play through the entire game with one of my cousins. And I loved it. And I kept on doing that with more and more people that I knew. And they absolutely loved the series as well. And they were able to do it with their friends. And it kept on stringing out just like that. Exactly.
So I want to just make it like a broad set of points. Kind of just agreeing with you.
Okay.
First, I also love Halo 2. The fact that it was the first game where you could dual wield, and I got the classic needler plasma pistol combo. Ooh. But I just want to make the point where I heard that.
I will say that the uncharged plasma sword is my favorite thing in the entire game, because you literally just punch people to death. It does, and the best part is, it doesn't kill them on the first hit. So you go pop, 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 and you still have the lunge too. Yes. So you just fly across the entire screen, and it's beautiful to see in co-op because your other friend is terrified. Has no idea what's going on.
But the point I wanted to make before we got on that little tangent, the point I wanted to make is that I think that was back when it was just like beautiful, because games actually were designed to just be like, hey, let's make it where it's fun for you, but also you can bring a friend into it. And it's kind of lost that aspect to it, because now I feel like a lot of people are just like, if the multiplayer games that aren't like couch co-op kind of lose a personal feel to it, and it kind of feels more like you're working for the company to sell copies for them, because it's like, hey, I can't play with you unless you pay 20, 40, 60 bucks
what
to
it
play
is,
with me.
It's become about expanding your playership and not making sure that your players are having fun.
Which is a terrible thing for a game company.
Yeah. And one thing I will say is that a difference of like horror games, like let's take the example of like Outlast or Alien Isolation or something like that, completely single player experiences. And they're fine games.
Outlast is trash.
Yeah, Outlast is fine. Outlast is fine.
No, it's trash.
I like
it's
it.
fine.
I like Outlast. All right, jeez. But yeah, Outlast and Alien Isolation single player games, they're completely fine. A game like Vermintide, or I'm actually having trouble. I think Alan Wake might be multiplayer or something like that. There are a few other horror games that are like, they have a multiplayer online aspect as well too. Like Dead Space 3, we don't talk about it though. This one's dead, and we're all sad about it, cry in our hearts.
They tried.
They tried, and they made two amazing games: Dead Space and Dead Space 2. Dead Space 3 technically does not exist, so we don't have to worry about it. But the biggest thing that I like is that, and the saddest thing too, is that larger developers are not going to focus on couch-based games. Like,
well, of course.
Yeah, of course. Because it's not, and you just explained that, because it's not going to make enough money for them, and it's about expanding who's playing your game, not making sure that they enjoy the game.
Well, and there's another aspect about it too. Yeah. Is that?
But one example that I want to bring up.
There's more about why couch co-op has gone away than just people want money.
I understand, but I want to bring an example on the horror.
Okay, sure.
Because like all of these games like possibly have like online multiplayer and stuff like that. Some of the horror games do as well too. There's one developer of a game called Space Beast Terror Fright.
Oh my goodness! This is the one that we almost played that one time.
Yes. Okay. And and we definitely should play. But this game is completely based around co-op play. If you play it single player,
You're gonna go
you will get
fucked.
destroyed
You'll
in
get
seconds.
fucked.
And the entire point of the game is to play it with 4 friends on a big enough TV, and to like coordinate your own strikes and stuff like that against aliens inside of a ship that you're trying to take over and control. And it's a completely couch-based experience. And so the saddest thing about it is that certain developers will make absolutely wonderful games based on the co-op couch experience, but it will not make them as much money as an online experience, but the experience of actually playing it will be better, if not the same in itself. Which is just a terrible thing to lose whenever you're talking about couch.
I would agree.
Well, and see, there are a couple of other things about couch that need to be addressed when we're talking about couch co-op, because it's really not just developers and publishers are greedy. You know, there's more to it than that. Some of the other things are, you know, there's this reality that nobody likes to talk about, that you know, everybody says, you know, oh, I want couch co-op back, oh, I want this, oh, I want that.
I don't.
You don't, like, couch co-op, when you're looking at statistics, it's not a salient selling point in the game.
Oh yeah.
And so, because it's not a salient selling point, you're not, that is to say, you're not going to gain a significantly measurable greater amount of players because there's couch co-op. It ends up being a resource sink for developers. You know, back when there was no online, of course you would play couch co-op because of course you would put in couch co-op because otherwise people aren't going to be able to play together, and then that's actually going to hurt your game's sales. However, it's a lot easier to put in it's a lot easier to put in something like online co-op or online multiplayer than it is to put in couch co-op. There are more resources involved in creating the systems necessary, and because couch co-op doesn't, I guess what I'm saying is that couch co-op doesn't earn back as much money as is needed to create it.
I'm completely aware that that's the case, and I understand that. It's just that those are the types of games that I used to play, like when I was a kid, when I was super into video games. But I didn't have the stresses of life and everything else like on me.
No, absolutely.
And like those are the best experiences with video games that I had. Because when you see people getting pissed off at a game, it's not them screaming and then turning off their mic and then leaving. It's them being pissed off right next to you. And it's wonderful because you can laugh at them, and it's great.
Yeah.
It's just like it's a different experience. And I will bring up a game that I don't know if it's going to sell well or not, but I'm actually hopeful for it. But
so I'm gonna let you finish, but we are getting close to our cutoff time.
that's true.
I'm gonna let you finish.
In fact, but
Rihanna had the better seat.
No, in fact, my
Beyonce
timer
was the best.
my timer has already gone off, but I wanted to continue the conversation because we were in a kind of a turning point when it went off. Anyway, continue, Josh.
No, so one game that I'm kind of excited for is a game that's sort of Dark Souls based, which you may or may not have heard of, coming out soon. So it's a game called Hellpoint, and it is a Dark Souls-like game based on Cthulhu mythos, old god mythos, and space combat.
I fucking need this.
Yes, and so
I need it in my life.
It's going to be coming out. I think it's either 2018.
What's it for?
Either mid to PC and console.
Hope you like fixing that one in post.
Yeah, I know, right? It's going to be exciting.
Wait, what?
It's going to be on PC, and it's
PC
also
probably.
Yeah, it's fine. I'll find a way somehow. But like the entire game is also, it's both based on on online and co-op, local co-op multiplayer. But like that in itself, it's a Dark Souls game with built-in local co-op. It does not have online. It has online multiplayer, but it's built in with local co-op.
That sounds interesting. I'm not sure how it would work
because
entirely.
it's like a co-op experience without lag, essentially.
Okay,
because you're playing on the same system.
Hold on, but the thing about Dark Souls is that every time you log onto a world, you're playing on a unique character. So does that mean that you would play, say, let's call it a hangar or an armor, the place where you keep your characters. Does that mean that you would essentially get on the world and to choose 2 characters from your armory rather than just one?
Well, the problem is, A, the game has not come out yet, and B, I am not the developer.
Okay. I was just wondering if you knew, because clearly you know more about the game than I do.
No, and that's because I've been following it on Kickstarter. It was a Kickstarter project before it actually became a green light.
Those are dangerous.
It's getting very close to actually being
What's it called again?
Hellpoint.
Hellpoint.
Yeah, and so I think, I'm going to assume, again, but I think the entire experience with that is, because there's a class system, I know there's a class system based around the game, I'm going to bet that you start 2 characters, and then you go in as a co-op set. And then each controller controls its own menu from the top-down side.
Damn.
And if they can get that to work, it will be a superior experience.
Would it be 2 different accounts that you play, like on different screens?
It would most likely
on the same screen.
If you're doing it local, I would assume that it would be tied to the same computer. If you did it online, it would probably be tied to 2 different.
So you can't play with your friend, and then later you want to play it by yourself. So you do it on a different computer, but you can't use it.
If you like that, and that's the thing I love about a local co-op. If you want to test out the game to see if it's something for you, you play a couch and you play it with a friend.
But what if you play it for a long time with a friend,
Then
and you get it so high that
because you buy it,
it doesn't transfer to your account?
What
if you have your own account though?
I don't know. The game has not come out yet, and I'm not the developer.
Why don't you know?
So I'm not
Alright,
sure.
guys, we need to wrap this up. I will say about Hellpoint, it's either going to be incredible and it will become my new addiction. I don't.
It's pretty gosh darn great. In the nicest language that I can say.
That's.
Yeah.
Gosh,
I appreciate that.
You're welcome.
And it would take a lot for something to dethrone Bloodborne for me. That
Something
said,
needs to. Honestly, something needs
that
to.
said,
That's all you talk about.
it's not all I talk about.
It is
70, at least 72%. I've done the math.
Give me
Every single person at this table can say. For sure.
Everyone listening can probably tell by
You
now.
want to know why I can say that? Because I think 25 to 30 minutes of the conversation about multiple co-op games, we have talked about nothing but Bloodborne.
I'm so
And
sorry.
Dark Souls. And Dark Souls.
I'm so sorry.
I thought we were going to be talking about maybe
I'm
cooperative
telling
board
you-
games because that's my area, but no.
And this is a great
maybe
experience
MOBAs.
for you, because have you played all the co-op games that we've talked about today?
Nope.
You should absolutely start and try them.
I will go buy Army and 2 and we
Dude,
can play it, dude.
I'll
It'll
get
be
bored.
fantastic.
No, you guys get Borderlands, we can play a multiplayer game.
I actually
Like
own
3 or 4.
Borderlands.
I don't
With
know
like 3 or 4.
Borderlands too.
If
I have
you get
Borderlands
Borderlands, we can play a 4-person game.
Ooh, dude, the Borderlands collection is on PS4, and so we could turn it into a Let's Play.
It's a cross-platform though,
No.
No.
and we're done.
We didn't even talk about League of Legends.
Yeah.
I have a closing point though. Steven, for someone who loves FromSoft so much,
FromSoft.
Yeah, you awfully got a from hard on about it.
And that's it. Podcast is over. We're never creating one again. It's done. That's it. It's gone.
Oh goodness.
Yeah. But I think the next time we talk about this stuff, we should definitely bring up multiple new genres of games and stuff like that. Yeah. So just so we can get a better experience, because I was gonna talk about Neo. I was gonna go.
I noticed.
Okay,
as soon as you were about to talk,
no,
I was like,
dude, I was
like, Neo.
I was
another
this
hour
close
for
to
this.
bringing up Neo because oh my god,
Jesus.
I was so
now that the
close.
levels have died down, Neo is probably one of my favorite co-op experiences of all time.
Dude,
of all time.
co-op Neo,
Absolutely incredible game.
co-op,
Yeah.
like
Yeah. You
Neo. Whenever you play co-op, it goes from being damn near impossible to this is a fantastic game. You know. I didn't
don't know
realize
if that
we
recorded,
were.
but I hope it
I
did.
didn't realize we were still recording.
We are still recording, absolutely. And so this is gonna go on YouTube. Yeah, it's great.
Damn it, Josh.
Yeah. No
Dang,
problem.
damn it, Bobby.
Anytime.
Anyway,
Anytime.
but
Give him a
what I was going to say about Hellpoint is that either it's going to be fantastic or it's going to be an absolute fucking mess.
It's a Kickstarter game. It has a 60-40 chance. 60% it's going to be bad. 40% it can actually be the holy grail of Dark Souls games that have gone from weird medieval, not medieval like lore to sci-fi in space.
Crap.
Okay, that was TJ throwing a bottle. I'm sorry if that blew out your ears, but you should be okay.
That's what they did.
But yeah, either it's going to be a wonderful experience that is not like any other Dark Souls game, or it's going to be the worst type of Souls-like game. I hate saying that because Crash Bandicoot was listed as a Dark Souls-like.
Okay,
game.
well,
I made it just so you know.
There's more about.
No, you didn't.
There's-
No, you didn't.
Yeah.
Well, okay. Whenever people throw around the word Souls-like,
Yeah.
they
Cuphead got a Souls-like rating.
no,
too.
they're talking about the fact that it's
But
hard
the
and
difficulty,
unforgiving.
they're not
Yeah,
talking
exactly.
about like the style.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
there
stupid.
there
That's
are
really stupid.
Yeah.
there.
Let's wrap this up, dude. We need to get out of here. I got math to do.
Yeah, no, true. Yeah,
exactly.
all right.
Leave that in.
Yeah, you can.
We're college students. We need.
That's true. We are all college students.
yeah,
and we have
yeah.
things to do.
I'm an
Yeah.
engineer. I'm really stupid.
I'm not an engineer. I'm
So
just
great.
taking engineering courses.
So on
Natural resources and
possibly
environment.
part 2, we talk about very different games.
We can talk about board games.
Yeah.
yeah,
We could talk about board games. We
I talk
possibly
about-
play Scythe because I just got Scythe and I'm
Ooh.
excited to try that out.
Ooh,
Oh, I was going to
that
talk about
sounds
cooperative board games, which is
cooperative.
Cooperative
Those are
board
fun.
games.
Those are really fun.
Cooperative card games. Too.
Hey, so what I'm thinking is what I'm thinking about doing is
What I'm thinking is hitting end on that recording button.
That.
all right.
So
Okay.
I think we're gonna
All right.
close it here,
All right,
guys.
yeah. See ya.
Oh, wait, we haven't closed yet?